Welcome to the Stumbling Spirit, Contemplations on the Path of Resilience. Whether you realize it or not, you are resilient. It's your birthright. As you take in your next breath, know this truth. It's not only about your capacity to overcome difficult situations, but it's about your courage to do the necessary work to heal, learn, grow, and move forward. What you gain is invaluable wisdom. And it's through these hard stumbles in life that we often discover a new purpose that aligns with our spirit. My name is Fabio da Silva Fernandez, Reiki Master, Mindfulness Coach, and Mystical Explorer. Join me as the Stumbling Spirit podcast highlights the lives of extraordinary people like you, sharing transformative stories and beneficial practices of resilience to guide you on your wellness journey. Glossophobia is the fear of public speaking. According to various online sources, this oratory anxiety is prevalent in roughly 75% of the global population, to varying degrees of intensity. Despite this overwhelming statistic, most of us are expected, if not required, to verbally communicate to groups in both academic and professional settings. For more than 30 years, Dr. Doreen Downing has dedicated her practice to helping people overcome their public speaking phobia. As a psychologist, Doreen applies a unique approach to helping her clients break through their anxiety and heal their wounded voice. Here to talk about this salient topic that can sometimes leave us in a cold sweat and weaken the knees is fearless speaking coach, Dr. Doreen Downing. Hello, Doreen.
Thank you for the introduction. Yes, it's been a lifetime journey for me, and I'm so glad that I found a way that I can help others.
And I'm really grateful that you're on the show. What is the connection between fear and voice?
Oh my goodness, we're gonna dive right in, huh? Yeah, well, fear is contraction. Fear chokes the throat, and voice lives within. It's not only in our vocal cords, literally as sound, but as an expression of what it is we want to say. And with fear, there's the physical, what I just pointed to, that we're not able to physically express because we're like some of the things you said, we're quivering or we're shaking or we're contracted and it's almost like being strangled. The voice doesn't come out. But the other part of being afraid is that for some reason, and this is why my psychology background and what I bring to people is getting at the root cause of anxiety. Voice, when we're little kids, we come into the world, goo, gaga, hello, just it's me, it's all about me early on. And that's where I think voice, the sense of being myself in this world and expressing, is it safe? Do people welcome me? Do they celebrate me? Do they go, yay, at the 2-year-old, or do they ignore you? Do they mistreat you? Do they abuse you? And all the ways in which that voice, that little voice, gets welcomed into the world or not. So the relationship between, to answer your question, relationship between voice and fear, I think has many explanations, not only the physical expression, but the emotional safety one feels about expressing and the confidence they either have or they don't have.
I want to get to the root causes, but I want to explore a little bit more about the symptoms. So you talked about constriction, you talked about quivering. I'm wondering if maybe you could explore a little bit more about what the common symptoms we might experience from a fear of public speaking.
No breath. And in our work with mindfulness, it's all about breath, right? So you lose your breath. It just becomes really short because there isn't access because the connection to what's inside is that's where fear lives. It's grabbing hold, and it's the heart is beating so fast that it feels like the head is being pounded by drums, and so people can't hear themselves think, or it just knocks the words out of your mind. So that heartbeat racing is the beginning of what people feel is like panic attack, and then breath is the losing the breath or shortness of breath. So of course, if your vocal cords are contracting, your voice is going to quiver, and shaky knees. What else? Oh, sweating. That's common, and work with people who can't hide it and their face turns red and they get embarrassed because they know that they're speaking and they are afraid and everybody's going to see it because their face is red. So those are some of the symptoms, I would say. And those are the physical ones that seem to signal to those who are listening, boy, this person's afraid. And then that's exactly what the person who's speaking doesn't want people to see, but they know that they can't stop it. And that's why they never, or they make decisions to either avoid or never step in the spotlight.
You mentioned heart rate. You also mentioned our breath and the fact that we might not be breathing in that moment of fear. I'm curious about the science behind what is going on. Why does the body react in that way?
Oh, good old-fashioned primal jungle. Because of that part, the back part of our brain, the amygdala, scientifically, it's all about wiring. And the amygdala part of our brain, the emotional kind of reactive, instant kind of preparing oneself for threat and to get ready to either leave the situation quickly or to bring out the claws and fight or flight to get out of there, happen because we're all animals. It's an animal instinctive nature to protect ourselves. And so we've got sensors. And that's one thing about mindfulness, I think, is that yeah, we've got sensors, but we also got something underneath the sensors so that we can interpret whether those sensors are real in this current situation. But before we go down that path, if we just talk about the neuroscience of what goes on in the nervous system, is that we get activated, and the frontal part of our brain, the cortex, that says, you shouldn't be afraid. There's nothing to be afraid. They aren't going to bite you. They aren't going to eat you up. You're not prey. But the wiring, this is what neuroscience has shown us. And there's a book called Rewire the Anxious Brain by Pittman and Carl, who are neuroscientists, that have shown the wiring is different in these two parts of the brain. So this part that says, don't be afraid, is coming up against this part. This part is more entrenched and stronger. You're not going to tell me what to do. I can't stop it. I'm being hijacked by fear. That's what I hear a lot. Hijacked by fear. I'm overwhelmed. I can't control it. And that's the situation, I think, in terms of brain science that goes on. And of course, the body's in full activation mode when the part of the brain that is looking around and saying, I don't feel safe. This doesn't feel good. I got to get out of here, or I've got to go hide, or I'll never go into that situation again.
So you talk about the survival instincts that we have in this battle within our brains between the prefrontal cortex and the back of our brain, but you also inferred earlier that there could be some causal factors as to why we might have this fear of public speaking. So I'm curious about your perspective around whether this is something that is learned behavior or if it's something that is innate, or whether there's a predisposition for us to be fearful in those situations.
Yeah, I would say there are several things that come up in answer to your inquiry right there is that Psychology 101, nature versus nurture, what we come into this world with, and then what that world is that we have arrived in and how it treats us and how it welcomes us or denies us. So that in terms of nature, being somebody myself who's more of an introvert and quiet by nature, I would say, is that I would probably tend to be, or those of us who are quieter tend to be people who are less, have less ease about being the center of attention and taking up space and having people look at them. And then those who are extroverted would be comfortable, engaging spontaneously and having less anxiety about going into situations and dancing around and being the center of attention. So that would just be that's that's kind of basic, like I said, 101 psychology. However, there are many extroverts I work with who are afraid of public speaking, introverts who are comfortable speaking in groups. Isn't that something? So I want to make sure that this dynamic between introverts and extroverts isn't a stamp on you that that's why you're afraid or not. It could contribute. So that's one thing I want to say about that. But nurture, oh my gosh. I have worked with so many people over the years who have been traumatized, that have been abused, who have been trapped in a culture where they can't, or even not just a culture, but a cult. Well, isn't cult and culture kind of similar, those two words, right? I could spend the whole time talking to you about examples of people who arrive in a certain environment and don't have the opportunity to become confident as little people. And then with that confidence as little people, they grow and they expand into more of what's possible for them because they have an inner connection with having been supported early in life. I just got off doing a podcast with two women on my Find Your Voice, Change Your Life podcast, and they talked about how lucky they feel that they were brought up in a family that had values for culture, music, and there's an appreciation of having early life that's been healthy, but later in life is when either the injury or the trauma might have happened. And so it's not necessarily all about early life, but I always poke around early life with my clients.
So you talk about the importance of nurture in this landscape of determining whether we develop a fear of public speaking. Earlier, we were talking about the physical symptoms. So since you brought up trauma, I wonder if you can share about the emotional symptoms.
Hmm. Well, trauma is obviously something that comes from the outside, whether it's done to the person or the person observes it. I know a simple trauma is divorce, that you have a secure environment and all of a sudden there's upheaval. Trauma could be something like alcohol in the family, where there's an unpredictability. The parent is coming home and you don't know whether there's going to be violence that night or whether it's going to be fun and games because of the alcohol that makes a difference in adults who are caretakers. So those are, see, divorce, alcoholism, disasters in terms of accidents, like a car accident, or even just natural disasters. Name it. Our world has hurricanes, they have tornadoes, they have, there are many ways in which we get scared just by living in this world. And I would say how how a little one is taught how to deal with situations that are hard or what we might call trauma, I think is the main thing. And then a lot of parents don't know how to do that because they probably had traumatic childhoods themselves.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, how things can cascade from one generation to the next. Because you brought it up, I'm wondering whether you can elaborate a little bit more on that generational or intergenerational aspect.
Oh my gosh. Oh yeah, intergenerational when you talk about that. Working with children who grew up in families where there has been Holocaust survivors and the kind of fear, you better be careful or else. It doesn't have to be verbal. It could just be watching. I work with a lot of people who said, my mom was always afraid, or my mom said, I better be careful and wear my jacket. Just the kind of always the being careful out in the world so that, where it might have come from in the parent is passed on to the child, but through messages, whether they're deliberate or just the world is unsafe out there, interpreted that way. And like what I just said, you better be careful.
And that has a direct connection to the voice.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. If you're going out into the world, just imagine feeling like I better be hyper aware, hyper vigilant. So I better be careful about whether people are paying attention to me or not. So I better not say something that maybe I think or feel because then I'm going to stand out. And then that's a vulnerable, dangerous place to be.
What is the difference between stage fright and glossophobia?
Well, I would say that when you describe glossophobia, it's more like a diagnosis. And I think would say that stage fright is glossophobia. I would say that stage fright is just another way of saying fear of being in front of others. And social anxiety comes to play too as a diagnosis. And sometimes people are afraid to be part of groups just because they've got what this diagnosis is called social anxiety. I do work with a lot of people who have social anxiety because they experience it more as speaking anxiety, being in front of groups or people and not feeling like they have a voice, that they can't express themselves.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that the term glossophobia is a diagnosis, and it is essentially a dimension of the fear of public speaking, which can also include social anxiety and stage fright.
Yes. All the ways in which we go, ah, don't don't look at me. Let me out of here. Or the white knuckling. Yes, I've got to do it. It's an interview. The only way I can get a job is to go show up at interviews. I hate interviews. The or presentations, over preparing, over rehearsing. So the strategies that people use to manage their anxiety, their phobia. There are all sorts of ways. You called it phobia early on, panic, stage fright, fear. It has lots of, it's kind of like a kaleidoscope. You could turn it any sort of way and it's still got all the little pieces, no matter what you call it. It's still all something that's experienced as really, really uncomfortable for a lot of people.
In my introduction, I mentioned a stat around the high number of people globally that
Yeah,
experience this fear.
yeah.
And depending on the online source, that percentage ranged from 63% to 75%, but it's still a large number regardless. I also saw data that showed that more women experience a fear of public speaking than men, 44% versus 37%, according to the National Institute of Health out of the US. And I also saw that this fear affects 74% of the Gen Z generation. So, why do you think that is?
Well, the first of all, the difference between men and women, I think, is cultural. In our society, the values that have been placed on men to, although I do work with quite a few men who are suffering from stage fright, from public speaking anxiety, but the women are more, again, I just had another podcast this morning about somebody saying she was part of a meeting where it was mostly men, and she felt like she had tape over her mouth and that there was all this kind of stepping over her. So this idea that the difference that you quoted between men and women feeling like they are less empowered in this society, I would say. And of course, we've come a long way to feel more like we can take up space, we can have a voice, we are important, we have a certain kind of power, and we have to learn how to tap into that in such a way that I would think is more true to ourselves as opposed to, oh, let's go in and have muscles like men do. We have to be able to, as women, feel like our uniqueness is very, very powerful. And the voice, in order to be ourselves, we do have to be visible. We do have to take space. And it isn't about elbowing people. It's about, I feel, about grounding ourselves as women into this kind of power that exists because we are uniquely wired as a female. There are all sorts of wiring of all sorts of people for sure, but you mentioned the difference between the two. And then the generational, wow, look at what's gone on in our society in the last 20, 30 years and where the internet that's come in, the way in which electronics have changed the way people are social media. It just feels like there are all these new elements that are affecting how people see themselves and how they show up, and maybe how they show up in social media, and then how much more vulnerable that is. It's not just a room full of people. It's if a video goes viral, that's thousands of people.
When I was reflecting on this topic, I was thinking back to COVID and how we were
Mhm.
all isolated. And for young people that were in school, where that is a very formative time for them to create relationships with friends, classmates, and they were effectively robbed of that. And so I was thinking that maybe that might be a factor as well. What do you think about that?
Oh, yes. I'm so glad you pointed to that. That would be the formation of how to speak, how to keep, I mean, that is such a learning environment to find ways over and over and over every single day in class, raising your hand or not, people teasing you, how to handle being bullied so that there's practice, I would say, over and over in that school environment where you show up and you're seen and you're heard, right? By humans.
What listeners might be surprised to find out is that you struggled with stage fright and public speaking yourself. So I'm wondering whether you can tell us a little bit more about your story.
Yes, yes, a PhD in psychology and suffering from stage fright, not being able to sit even in a group of other psychologists where we're just giving information about our cases, sharing who we are and what we done on treatment, let's say. And by the time it got to halfway around the circle, my heart would, I'm talking about the racing heart. That's the one I knew most, is the racing heart that felt like a drum in my ears, just pounding, Fabio, pounding in my head. That's how frightened I was. Isn't that weird? I go through all those years of becoming a psychologist to understand human behavior, and here's this fright that I had to hide from others the best I could. And as long as I was in my office with one person, because I'm an excellent listener, that's what I've been trained to do, and what I think is my gift, and I love it, is to create space for people so that they feel like they're heard and they get to learn something. But put me at the time, put me at the center of attention. I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. So in a way, I was trapped in my office as long as I couldn't get out and speak in front of groups.
So, what got you over that hurdle?
Well, first of all, I was asked to give a presentation on my research at at the university, and I said, "No, no, not me. I have stage fright, or I can't. I have public speaking anxiety. No way can I do it." And the people who were interviewing me or who were talking to me, it wasn't an interview, said, "But isn't fear your business? Aren't you a psychologist? Isn't that what you do every day?" And there was, I think at that's a moment I look back on and see that there was already something uncomfortable about it, about me hiding, knowing, that personal development potential is really about accessing the more of who you can be. So, I mean, I already knew it, but it was something I didn't understand, couldn't control. So I think that's what started my journey to find my voice and to overcome stage fright. And I started with Toastmasters.
I've known people in the past in my previous career who have mentioned Toastmasters and said that it was really transformative for them.
I would say that it helped me get better at hiding. So in a way, it was opposite. I knew how to do vocal variety, and I knew how to do pauses, and I knew how to make a speech, beginning, middle, end, and work on ums, no ums, eliminate them. However, I did not reach in all 7 years of Toastmasters where my vulnerable, real, authentic self was. I learned how to make speeches.
So, you mentioned Toastmasters in a very interesting way that it helped you in some areas, but it actually masked the fear that you were experiencing on the inside. And this is not anything against Toastmasters, but this was just your personal experience around that platform to be able to share your voice. So I'm wondering whether you can talk about what the point was at which you broke through that fear, that internal fear.
Well, I would say that first I had to come to the realization that the path I was on in terms of being a good public speaker, I could be a good public speaker, but I was still not able to be more fully myself and really share what was meaningful and truthful and real about myself. And it came to a head when I had won all sorts of contests. I was a contest winner. I knew how to do good speeches. But what had happened is that because I had already started realizing that the speaking was not as real as I wanted it to be. It was more performance techniques rather than just true expression. And I started working with a group called Speaking Circles International, where the environment is to stand in front of the group, I mean, it's really full mindfulness presence practice. There's no agenda to say anything. It's about coming into this now new moment, opening yourself up to the listening that's in the room and listening to yourself, listening to the listeners listen to you. And that's where I started to feel like this realness inside of me started to emerge in a safe environment. Toastmasters was not safe. It was a training, but it was not safe for the little girl who was hiding all these years to come out and say, ah, you could cry, you could talk about whatever came up. And in the feedback that you got in those environments, those circles, was only positive, only the essence of who you are, more of in fact, we called it non-content zones. So it wasn't about speech making, it was about expression, honest, truth expression. And so that's where I started to do that kind of work at the same time I was doing Toastmasters. So then this contest, I decided to share my experience of learning I was a diabetic. And I referenced a poem by Machado about the leaves drying up. And there was no more jasmine. I'm even feeling it right now. The memory of telling my story and the vulnerability of coming to terms with the fact that, my life was starting to dry up and I didn't have any scent of me. So I shared that story and it was real, it was powerful. I could feel in the audience, an energetic transmission of truth. That was me. And then the other people who were in the contest were, doing bells and whistles and props, I mean. So afterwards, when they were announcing the winners, it was somebody got third place, and I thought, "Ooh, good, I got second or first. Second place? No, I didn't get second. Okay, I must have gotten first because it was so good." And then the clown got first place. I said clown, but I meant the person who was more performance and clowning and entertaining. And just remembering that moment right now, I'm feeling how profound that was for me because people came up to me afterwards and were totally blown away by my presence, by what I said. They couldn't believe I didn't win because of the power of who I was, how I was on stage. And so then I started realizing, oh, this is about transformational speaking, that I am speaking in such a way that the audience has a transformation, not just, oh, they go away laughing or feeling inspired or entertained or persuaded, all the other ways in which Toastmasters teaches you something. They felt transformed. And then that's when I knew that's my path. How do I develop more of that strength inside of myself to stand in places like to say that Toastmasters can only take you so far for some of us, because Toastmasters has taken people all the way for sure. There are types that it works for. For me, I needed something more gentle, more safe, more deeper to get at really what are some of and I could talk about root cause my own, but the root cause inside to go and heal that so that when healing happens deep, deep, deep inside, there's a connection finally, not only to who you are truly, but to really deep, the spirit, the I don't know. It just feels like there's an alignment that can happen and that voice can come and words and can come from a different place rather than performance and scripts.
You were talking about that you had uncovered some root causes within yourself. And so I'm wondering whether you would be able to share within your level of comfort, what was it that you needed to work through?
Wow, that's very tender. My mother had bipolar, so she was cycling into these real highs and then these real lows. So she was in and out of the hospital for severe depression, and my grandma would take care of my sister and me. And when mom would come back from the hospital, my grandma would tell us to be quiet because mom would get sick and have to go back to the hospital again. So you can already see that that message, shut up, or there are going to be severe consequences. You're going to make your mommy, go away if you're going to be a 5-year-old full of energy. So you better, tap it down, quiet yourself. All right. It's a different kind of quiet than what we talk about with mindfulness. It's like a shutting down, I guess, is what you might say. Yeah, a shutting down. So that was what was inside, and home environment was cold and dreary, and it was not easy and happy. But school is where I found where I could shine. And I think that that separation between what's inside of me, what I'm holding inside of me, what I'm hiding, what I'm all wrapped up inside, nobody knows. But outside, I was able to develop. I was a teacher's pet. I got A's. I got a homecoming queen, head of the pom pom girls. I was really out there. Isn't that amazing? Nobody would guess that deep inside of me, I had what I would think is a form of what we talked about earlier, trauma. A mommy who had mental illness and, the kind of not being able to be freely expressed early on in my life. A lot of people that I work with have had the whole pattern, but mine and some people that I've worked with go, well, I'm ambitious, I'm a leader, I'm out there, but I still don't feel comfortable being myself. And in fact, I just worked with a woman who's CEO of her company who goes out and gives speeches all the time, but she was on a board and asked to give a talk about her own personal journey. Guess what? She got scared. So isn't that, so that's how she found me, because she was already comfortable. She didn't realize why she was so anxious. And it turns out there's some reason why she was anxious. And I won't go into the details of that, but it was definitely some personal wounding that was inside. Just like I did, I was able to go out into the world, kind of like what Toastmasters did. That's why I got better at speech making. Still hiding. It's a pattern.
So let's move from the transformation of the wounds to the stage and being able to harness that power to transmit that empowerment to the audience, which is what you were speaking about. You offer a free brochure on your website, downloadable to anybody, called The 7-Step Guide to Fearless Speaking. And you also do a deeper dive in a book called The 7 Secrets to Essential Speaking. So let's briefly go through each of them. So, number one is be silent. Can you elaborate on that?
Oh, yeah. It's learning how to quiet the mind, how to understand that the nervous system has what we talked about earlier, the activation, but it also has the other part of our nervous system that helps calm. Breath is one way in which we can calm ourselves. And so what I don't teach a certain breathing technique, like in through the nose, out through the mouth, or the box breathing. But I do ask people to pick something that works for them, that feels like they can do anytime, anywhere, and that they develop the practice of breath, not breath control as much as comfortable breathing when they are under stress, because that's what we're talking about. Because what gets activated is the stress response. And what we're using in terms of this first step, be still, be silent, is to use activation as a warning sign to do something, whether it's breath or any other the practices that I have for people, to come into down, down, down. Oh, to a still point you couldn't get at in Toastmasters because you got it. No, no dead space. Keep the words coming. It's just like one of the biggest challenges the people I work with have is that they're afraid they're going to go blank. So let's practice going blank. And what happens? And what are the other resources that you have if you find yourself losing your words and going blank? So that comfort with stillness, it's the next step after we've done all that, what you and I have already talked about, the root cause, working with and healing that. First we have to get to a place where we're more comfortable even approaching new techniques around finding the voice. And stillness is a way that you can begin to hear something, which is your own deep inner voice.
And connected to being silent is step two, which is being present. So I wonder if you can talk about that.
Our favorite subject, huh? Yes. Oh, yes, yes, yes. People who come to me have had usually something in the past that they remember and their body remembers, so they never want to repeat it again because they project it into the future and they see it happening again. That's often what the dynamic is. So then the training is to somehow, and I have techniques that work with that past stuff, like not going there, how to not go to the past, and then how not to rehearse in the future over and over again failure, because that's what they're doing. But there are also techniques about mental rehearsal that's different, picturing it different. But in this step, it's all right. So it's built on the first one. You've learned how to be quiet and not have to fill up the space, not have to find words. What is it like to just be still and with, and this is in a safe group to learning how to do this with a listener? Okay, what does this relational presence feel like? I'm in this now moment. I'm not in the past and I'm not projecting into the future. Wow, there's all this space. Oh my gosh, I really am free. I'm free from fear. And then there's this expansiveness that happens. Like we still haven't reached anything about finding the words yet, but we're beginning to build the capacity to be present in the here and now. If we know who we are and we have a message, we're more able to align with it and it flows more easily, just like I'm feeling right now as I even practice what I preach. The stillness and then the being present in the here and now. Because if you're afraid, you aren't in the here and now. Fear and I mean, yeah, fear exists in the here and now, but it really isn't the essence of being fully in the pureness of now.
Step three is be seen. So why is being seen important?
Well, this has to do with eyes. People are afraid to be seen and they're afraid to look at people looking at them, right? And there's a lot of activation here with society, with parents who give the look. You better be quiet, just with one look. Sexual advances are often, with the eyes. So I think the eyes have been trained to not be open is basically what I'm saying, because you've got to be using them to measure how safe you are in the environment. And you're also not able to let people in. They say, what is it? The windows to the soul, but they don't want to be anybody coming at them. So there's this, it's like not just curtains, like those kind of coverings for windows that you bring down and lock down. That's what it feels happens to the eyes. And my work is to soften the eye. In fact, you could do it right now. I could do it right now. Softening the sockets around my eyes. And if you do it right now, you notice something else. Maybe your shoulders might drop or breath might, cheeks feel a little softer. And the gaze, there's a gaze rather than a look. And traditional public speaking says, look at your audience. And I say, gaze softly. And when you're gazing softly at your listeners, your eyes are like more welcoming, and people feel the difference between eye contact and eye presence. And that's what the whole training around being comfortable being looked at.
Step four is be listening. A lot of people might argue that listening is the most important element of communication. So I'm wondering whether you could share your thoughts around this secret to being able to speak publicly.
What people are trained to do is be a speaker, which then activates. This is something I talked about in the summit that day that you and I were on, the Mindful World Summit, is that when you are in a group, what is it? What would it be like to become the biggest listener as opposed to just being the speaker? Because if you're a speaker, you're worried about how you are, the words, are they landing? You're afraid of judgment, all that gets activated. But people, I think, naturally know what listening is like. Remember, we're building on stillness inside, presence in the now, opening up your eyes, softening your gaze. Now you're listening to the now, in the now moment. You're listening with, not to people. You're listening with them so that in listening with them, your words are flowing into their listening as opposed to I'm speaking at you, I'm listening with you, and it changes. It can change your script. That's what I meant about transformational speaking. Not only are the listeners transformed, but you get a transformation by speaking in this way, this new way. If you're really in the moment, soft gazing, and now we're talking about listening to this now moment, expansive now moment. The eyes are taking in everything. You're with yourself, and the words are arising rather than going up here to find the script. It's like, oh, I am a messenger. Yes, I have a message, but it's the messenger that I work with.
Number five is be positive. Why is being positive important?
I could turn that around with you, isn't it? I mean, it's like carrying, I say in my book, you carry the sunshine with you and you radiate. There's a brilliance, it's like the sunshine, it's warmth. And that's finding not just only the positive spirit inside of yourself, it's like the essence of who you are is truly alive. And I think I could use lots of words, which I do: majestic, brilliant. Brilliant has a lot of that light. So be thinking of, to me, it's more than just being, ha ha, positive person. It's really deep work to know in your heart you're full of warmth and stand in front of a group knowing that you are radiating warmth out into the whole world or the whole room. But through the room, you're radiating out to the world in any way. But the light also, like if you feel the sense of being a beacon in a room, that, do you see what I mean by more than just a nice little positive smile? It's the radiance of beauty, the radiance of magnetism. And that's what I mean about positive. And I probably someday might change it to something even more descriptive, be, I don't know, be brilliant. But positive is about looking at people. And this helps because if you really learn how to tap into your own essence, when you're in front of people and you're afraid, the trick is to look at the positive inside of them. Ooh, awesome. It's just like it changes everything about being in a group, speaking publicly to people, is that you look at them and you start to be amazed at them. Not you don't feel that they're judging you anymore because you've learned to look at what the positive is inside of them. Isn't that something? To rethink what public speaking is all about.
Magnetism might relate to this next step. So, number 6 is be connected.
One person at a time. Instead of seeing the group, whether it's 5 people or 500 people, as one unit and scanning the room and talking like this, and the words are just spilling out everywhere. So instead, imagine, like, Fabio, you have a glass in front of you. It's empty. And I'm listening to you listen to me, and I take my words and I put my words right into your listening, which is one person at a time. And in a way, this also solves fright because most people know how to talk to one person at a time. So that's all you need to do is just find another. If you're already trained in how to find positive in people, you just kind of scan for the positive person out there and you go, oh, good, I'm glad I found you. And you start talking to that person. Oh, good. Start talking to that person. And I learned this in England when I was training British Stammering Association. And my mentor that I had been learning how to do this kind of transformational speaking with had me go on stage for the first time to hundreds of people. And I was activated, let's say. But I knew what I needed to do was breathe, come into this now new moment, pause. I mean, it wasn't a technique pause. It was just until I could find myself in the moment, even if the audience is thinking, oh my God, she doesn't know what she's going to say or she doesn't know what she's doing. It's just like I have to be able to be so committed to coming into this now moment and looking out, okay, find one person. Ah, there's a spark. And then I was able to find my words because I was listening, being with that one person. And then pretty soon it felt like the whole audience was like sparkling because I was connecting to just one person at a time.
I think a lot of people might relate to the last step, step 7, which is be yourself.
Can anybody really be themselves if somebody says, just be yourself? And that's what a lot of training is, just be yourself. And that's why this journey that I have, this inner journey that helps people find their true self, you might say, their who they truly are. That's what I'm more interested in rather than teaching them how to be a speaker. That if they learn how to do the kind of steps that I'm talking about, they will come closer to aligning with what's true inside of themselves and express it from there. So you don't get to be yourself until if you're talking about public speaking anxiety, if you've done the work of healing the trauma, healing the anxiety, and then you've learned these mindful steps that I teach, 7 of them, you get to be yourself. And that's where fearless speaking begins to feel like, now I get it. Because I know, just like I explained what it was like to be on that stage, I knew how to recalibrate myself in the moment. And somebody who has worked with me says that this process is like finding grace under extreme stress.
Finding space under extreme stress.
I had said grace, but also space. Yes, I had said finding grace, but I think both are true.
I like
Good.
that. I
Yeah.
like finding grace and finding space.
Yes. If you find the space, you'll find your grace. New motto.
To my listeners, what do you think of my conversation with Doreen Downing? Do you have any personal experiences with stage fright and public speaking? Send me your thoughts on Blue Sky at thestumblingspirit.bsky.social. You have a unique approach to helping people called the Find Your Voice method. And I'm wondering whether you could share a little bit more about that.
Yes, it encapsulate all of what we're talking about today. There are four pillars. It's a framework, and the first is discovery. Discover more about what's going on around the fright and the fear, where it came from. And the second is about the stillness, what I talked about, presence, that whole kind of, you can see how I bring together the teaching into these four pillars. So the stillness, the presence, the connection. The fourth is how to engage in the ways that I've talked about, the eyes, the listening, the one person at a time, and then the expression. So discovery, presence, connection, and expression. So finally, in this Find Your Voice method is expression. We don't start with expression, and that finding your voice and voicing your vision is all a process of discovery.
So, you just talked about this process of discovery, and often this process has to do with doing some deep work to uncover those wounds
Yeah.
that occur more likely when we're in childhood. You shared, and I want to thank you for sharing your personal story of the wounds that you experienced as a child. After working with countless clients over these number of decades that you've had your practice, what are the main takeaways that you've learned about this fear of public speaking?
It prevents so many people from living more fulfilling lives. So that's the first thing that touches me is that it actually hurts me that people are trapped in their identities, their beliefs that, well, this is just the way that I am. I'm just a listener. I'm not good at public speaking. Because actually, I see, and I'm putting quotes around public speaking, it's not just on a stage, at a meeting, in a work environment, at a PTA meeting, at any kind of small group environment. I know in my case, it was even extended family meetings where I felt shy about speaking up because there was so many verbal people in my family, so many out there people. If you're not so out there, how do you find space for yourself? So I would say that my compassion and feeling for people who are trapped in this fear and, like I said, this idea, this belief is what's most remarkable for me. Well, then, what can I do about it? So, what I've learned is that I have taken the journey, inner and outer, and I do have resources, I do have experience, I do have expertise, I do have a unique way, and I can offer that. And so that's something I feel very confident about. I can help people go from being total scaredy cats to being able to find and express their truth in any situation, because life Like I started to say a second ago, it's not just your stage. Life is your stage. And do you have a voice every single moment that you need to have it? I mean, that doesn't mean you say it. It's just, do you have it there available to you or not?
What does resilience mean to you?
I knew somewhere along the line today we would talk about resilience because of your passion for resilience. Well, I guess I would say, and this would be something now that you just asked me about it and tie it to this question about what I've learned about speaking anxiety, is that people are resilient, right? There is more that's possible for them. And how, first of all, it's like, can they believe that it's possible? And I think that has something to do with resilience. Are they stuck or trapped into an idea that they have? Or can they be more, can they stretch? That's what resilience is. Can they begin to open up? Can they expand? That's resilience, is what resilience, into the idea of, oh, Doreen can help me. All right, let's do this. And so that I think that resilience plays a big part of why people might choose me, because they are open to the idea that they can go from where they are to where they want to be. And that's resilience. That's a new kind of opportunity. And my whole process is, as you noticed it, every single step starts with be. It's not about speaking, it's about being. So I think that being is all about resilience. Yes.
All season long, I have been exploring the connection between compassion and resilience. And I'm wondering whether you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I would bring it back to first myself and how I believe in the power of being a compassionate listener and a healer that then gives people the message that they can, which to me is resilience. They can come from someplace that they're stuck. And isn't that an amazing kind of thing? So I would say first, resilience and compassion have to do with me personally. But then the message I give to people is, all right, so you've got this thing called fear. Let's understand it. So, yeah, you were this little one and you were thrown into this spelling bee and your dad scolded you for losing. All right, let's look at the little girl who happened to be in the spelling bee and how she felt. Let's, she had all that pressure, so that, we start to use compassion in the healing process itself. So that I would say that that's so important in coming to see fear as a protective device or something that we had to have in order to move on in life. To be more of who we needed to be, we needed to hide ourselves, and fear did a good job of doing that. Thank you, fear.
We focused our conversation today around overcoming the fear of public speaking, breaking through that fear, dissolving that fear. And I'm wondering whether you can offer some insights as to what practices that people can try to cultivate their resilience and overcome their fear of public speaking.
It goes right along with what we just talked about, compassion. That I think developing self-compassion, the whole message I just talked about in terms of fear being something that's standing in the way of what is possible for you, and that it's not about fighting fear, it's about saying, hello, fear, like having a friendly relationship with fear, to begin to see that there's a reason why. And if you understand the reason, it seems like the compassion towards yourself and how you became the way you are, which is either anywhere from nervous to terrified, somewhere in that spectrum of speaking in front of whether it's groups or individuals, and whether it's on a stage or in your living room. It's the first powerful way of being with yourself is compassionate, with compassion.
Dr. Doreen Downing is the psychologist and fearless speaking coach behind the Find Your Voice method and author of The 7 Secrets to Essential Speaking. Thank you so much, Doreen, for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And thank you for sharing your thoughts and expertise around how we can overcome our fear of public speaking.
Thank you.
If you want to learn more about Dr. Doreen Downing, visit her website, DoreenDowning.com. You can also follow her on Instagram at Dr. Doreen Downing. Thank you for listening to The Stumbling Spirit, Contemplations on the Path of Resilience. This is Fabio da Silva Fernandez. Join me again for another episode of transformative stories and beneficial practices to guide you on your wellness journey. If you wish, you can follow and DM me on Blue Sky at thestumblingspirit.bsky.social. Until next time, take a deep breath and another step forward on your path of resilience.